This is The Interview. I'm David Marchese, and this week I'm talking with Andrew Schulz. Schulz is a comedian and podcast host who's made his name over the last few years with an irreverent, brash, defiantly anti-woke style of comedy. His newest special, though, which is called Life and came out earlier this year, is a bit of a departure for him because it's still defiantly irreverent and anti-woke, but in it he talks about he and his wife's experience having a kid through IVF. So there's some personal storytelling in there too.
There was so little sperm in this cup, I could have counted them individually.
Despite his success as a stand-up, he's probably best known as a podcast host, and he co-hosts Brilliant Idiots with Charlemagne the God and Flagrant with his fellow comedian Akash Singh. And those shows have been described as being part of the so-called manosphere, which is a term that Schulz, I don't think, ever uses to describe what he does and maybe takes a little bit of issue with. But whatever you want to call his podcast ecosystem, it's inarguably influential. Then candidate Trump went on the show about a month before the election last year, and this year Schulz has had Pete Buttigieg and Bernie Sanders both on as guests as well. I wanted to understand if Schulz thinks he and his comedy podcasters have as much influence as he's been said to have, and also to try and understand what he knows about capturing the online audience's attention. Oh, and just a couple quick things before the interview starts. Schulz references Felice a couple times, and just so you know, Felice is a producer on the show who was in the room during the first part of the interview. And then, in case it's not obvious from the description of Schulz's comedy, he does use a lot of raunchy language, so be prepared for that. Here's my conversation with Andrew Schulz. Andrew, thank you for taking the time to talk with me today. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. I'm honored. Thank you for having me.
You know, the people listening or watching won't realize this, but both the camera guys in here have mustaches. Our engineer in the adjacent room, mustache. Our producer, who you were just talking with, mustache. I didn't get the memo. What happened?
I don't know, but I walked in here. I told Felice that there's a lot of testosterone. She's safe. There's nothing that could possibly happen. Okay. If anybody walks through that door, you got 4 mustaches ready to tear their head off. Okay, Felice?
And me.
I don't know about you. I think you're going to be with Felice, and I think we're going to keep you safe as well, David. Nothing's going to happen, okay?
I'm glad to hear it. But okay, so to start, I think it's fair to say that it's probably within the last 4 or 5 years that you've really kind of had a blow up in your career.
Sure.
And what do you think has shifted in the culture to enable you to come to prominence the way that you have?
I have trouble figuring out exactly when it happened, but when I first started posting stuff on the internet, specifically stand-up, things changed for me in my career. So essentially, I was trying to get an HBO special, or back in the day, this is Netflix is just coming to prominence, so it's or Comedy Central. I was just trying to get on anything. I was trying to get 5 minutes, and I couldn't really get any motion with stand-up. And I, out of desperation, I filmed my own special, pitched it to everybody. Nobody wanted it. And I was like, I'm going to put this online. I think there is an appetite for comedy online. And at the time, I think that there was a little bit of a, sensitivity, especially in corporate America, about edginess and jokes, et cetera, which I think is completely gone the other way now. But at the time, people were really sensitive or concerned. And so my gamble, which was not really, it was just pure desperation, was maybe if I put this out on YouTube, there will be an audience that likes this type of comedy. And I had confidence in it because I was touring the country doing comedy clubs every weekend and seeing audiences react to the comedy. So I put it out, and the weird thing happened, and I got some data from talking to people, not people in the industry, just friends. They'd be like, yeah, I watched 20 minutes. Everybody watched only 20 minutes. And I was like, okay, maybe it's too long, especially for someone you don't know.
Right.
Getting an hour out of somebody's day is difficult. Everybody has a minute, everybody has 5 minutes, everybody has maybe 20. So I think I put out a 20-minute version of it. And the next weekend I sold out a comedy club. And I was never a sell out a comedy club guy at that point in my career. And I was like, well, that's kind of cool. And I didn't attribute it to the special. And then the next weekend I sold out another one. I was like, what the? Is this from the special? And then I started putting out a new joke every week for a year, like 52 weeks of comedy, I think I called it. And tickets kept on selling and just momentum kept on building. And I was like, whoa, there's really something over here on the internet. And I can be like my authentic self with comedy, despite like what the cultural sensitivity of the time is, which you can't really control. And it just continued to build.
But why is it that on the one hand we think of sort of people's attention spans as extremely limited and you need to chop stuff up and but then also, on your podcast, it'll go 2 hours or Rogan will go 3.5 hours. And so if you know that in all likelihood, people are sort of tuning in and out of attention to what you're doing on the podcast.
Yeah.
Does that sort of change how you think about the material that constitutes the podcast?
No. But like we're still going to have the same conversation and endeavor to make you want to tune in the entire time, But like you might be driving. Like you don't have to watch every second of it. Whereas like with a stand-up special, you want to watch. You want to understand like the tension. You want to see the, ideally my face and how I'm reacting to these things. And the audience can be an instrument in a way and you're kind of playing with it.
Yeah.
It's almost like a horror film. Honestly, how I edit comedy specials is like a horror film. There's just tension release. And it's hard to feel that unless you're watching.
You obviously have sort of clear ideas about sort of what you can do that works with audiences and both and on like a practical and sort of like an emotional level. Does that create a temptation to pander? And then also, how do you make sure you don't pander? Like if there are levers I can pull to like make something work.
You're not there's a way where you could just run it up every episode. But if you actually are trying to like create something authentic, you're going to make less money. But the benefit of that in the long run is that you maintain your integrity and you maintain your authenticity, which is like the most important thing for me. Now, if I authentically feel a certain way about something and that thing happens to be popular, I'm not going to change my feeling on it just because it's popular. I am a contrarian in some ways, but like I'm not going to say that New York is not the best city in the world just because everybody else is saying it. They're right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And oftentimes what happens is like you'll have an opinion that's like maybe a little bit different and you'll be rebuked for that opinion for years. And then people will start to come around and then the same people that rebuked you will start echoing those sentiments with no accountability whatsoever.
Close that loop. I'm not getting the connection.
This is like a... So we had Bernie on the pod, who I love. Like
just a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, I just love Bernie. And we were just talking about like the way that he had been painted in 2016, that there was like a Bernie Bros problem, that his supporters were racist, sexist, and bigoted. And then I asked him about it, and he was like, yeah, I mean, this is, done by the DNC, and, they saw these amazing rallies we were doing with all this diversity, and it was this beautiful thing, and they tried to make us radioactive. I go, it's interesting. Like, during this election, we asked all these Democrats to come on to the podcast. None of them came on, and Republicans made appearances on the podcast more, and they called us not Bernie Bros, the podcast bros, and they said we're sexist, bigoted, and racist.
Who is they in this example?
That's a good question. I should give you like an exact answer, but I think that there was like...
Yeah, I just wonder if this is a straw man that you've...
Yeah,
after the fact concocted.
Maybe the question I would ask is, do you think that was an unfair representation?
Of
like,
you guys?
There are certain media figures labeling the manosphere and the podcast bros that way?
I think that's right, yeah.
So you have heard that?
Yes.
So who would they be for you?
The media.
Well, that's what I just said.
No, you said they. Yeah. I said something specific.
You think that yours is more specific?
Yeah, journalists, commentators.
I fear if I said the media, you would have been who specifically. You would have said the same thing. I feel like your answer is just as vague. And I'm not trying to bully you into position. What I'm trying to expose is that I don't think that I was like pinpointed enough on my accusation, and it is a kind of big accusation. But I'm glad that you agree.
It just is interesting when people have a perception that somehow they're being sort of attacked or labeled. You just the inclination for me is to wonder, like, well, is that happening? And I think in your case,
I don't think it's nefarious intent. By the way, I think that like when you talk for 2 or 3 hours on a podcast every week, you can take excerpts from it and make me look ridiculous.
Yeah.
You can make me look however you want. You can make me look like the sweetest, kindest, like loving dad. You can make me look like an absolute tyrant. We talk for 6 hours total a week on a podcast. A 30-second excerpt, you can do whatever you want with. And that's the cost that we have to take on for putting out content. We can't complain about that. It's more just like oftentimes getting labeled a certain thing and then everybody kind of, not everybody, but seeming like culture maybe catching up or coming around to it. And there doesn't seem to be much accountability of maybe we shouldn't have said those things about those guys for calling Biden old. Right. Now that we're all saying that we covered up the fact that he maybe wasn't actually the president. So then I'm in this situation where I'm like, I shouldn't make a big deal about this because that's selfish. What I should do is just be like, hey, it's cool that we're all agreeing on something and I shouldn't punish you for agreeing. You know, that would be like the mature,
Yeah.
You know?
You know, it's funny. I have this long list of questions that I have sort of structured in such a way as to try and like get to the sort of more provocative material in like a incremental way. But I feel like we could just get into things with you and I wouldn't have to do that kind of work.
You don't have to do whatever. Also, I love when you're self-reflective in your interviews. You like ruminating on what you're feeling in the moment is good.
All right.
Feelings are hard for me, man. You just know what you're feeling every second of the day.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Why are they hard for you? You don't seem like someone for whom feelings are hard.
No, I'm very sensitive.
Yeah.
But
articulating them in the moment?
No. It's like it's not even articulating, it's like understanding the type of feeling I have. This is like something I'm learning with like therapy and shit, where it's like I'm very used to be like, you did this thing to me. And it doesn't matter. That doesn't matter what you did because it might not even be your intention to do that thing. But if I say, I feel rejected by you saying that, now you're like, oh shit, I didn't want to make you feel rejected. But I have to understand the feeling of rejection more than the feeling of justice. I'm justice oriented. Like if I see somebody cut Felice in line and I don't even know Felice, I'll tap them on the shoulder and be like, no, the line's back here. I'm crazy like that. Like justice is important, even if it has nothing to do with me. You know what I mean? Like,
I do.
So,
all right, good.
Go. Just ask. No prep, nothing. Let's go.
So you said you asked Democrats to be on the podcast. Presumably, we're talking about like last fall in the run up to the election. So who did you ask? Who did you ask, and who said?
Buttigieg, Waltz, Kamala. I mean, we had Mark Cuban, who was a surrogate for the Dems, on, and then we asked Mark. We're like, dude, we're really trying to like balance it. We like to hear from all voices. Like the podcast, like is all voices. Like that's the idea of like the ethos is our friend group. We have all these different perspectives, but we're still friends and we still argue about these things and there's whatever, it doesn't matter. And yeah, just none of them and more, I'm sure, but Kamala for sure. And then her team just lies, just blatantly lies.
About what?
About us reaching out.
They say they didn't?
Yeah. And it's just wild.
Yeah.
It's wild to blatantly lie when not only did I reach out, Charlamagne, who's like working with them, reached out. Mark Cuban, who's a surrogate, reached out, and we reach out, and they just blatantly lie. And then when people will write articles about it, they will lie by telling the truth. Meaning, they'll say like, Flagrant or Andrew says he reached out to Kamala, but we reached out to the Kamala people, and they said that that never happened. So what is the reader supposed to interpret that as?
It's an evasion.
And I think it's an indictment on me.
Right.
Because it's almost like calling me a liar.
Yes, this is the justice-oriented part of you that's coming out right now. But so you had this interest in having
Bernie as well, Obama as well, Clintons. We got close. I wanted Bill on
in having Democrats on, and it didn't happen in the fall of 2024.
Yeah.
This year, in the past couple of months, you've had Bernie, you've had Buttigieg. And so the lag between like actually having Democrats on in this space of all voices and wanting to have them on, you're saying is solely because the Democrats wouldn't come on.
Yeah.
And so why are they doing it now?
Why do you think?
I want to hear you say it.
Well, what is your feeling?
Well, because they decided it's advantageous for them.
And then before, they probably thought that they didn't need it. Also, I wouldn't say that they holistically decided that it was advantageous to them because I think the party is quite fractured. There's like the Bernie side of the party, and then there's probably the front runner now being like Buttigieg side of the party. And I think Buttigieg comes on and has his biggest interview of his career, and then all of a sudden, the Bernie side is like, yeah, we'd love to come on. You know?
Yeah.
I also think like having Buttigieg come on like made me feel safe. You know, and like
For others.
Yeah, we're not a
yeah.
gotcha pod. Like,
Yeah.
if we're asking you to come on, it's because we're interested in you. We're interested in like the decisions you want to make and it's how it's going to affect, Americans. That's like really important to me. So I was awesome having Pete on. Yeah, I thought he was great. Like smart guy. He doesn't like talk down or finger wag. It's a very rare thing now in politics. But he'll meet you where you are. And then after meeting you where you are and disarming you and making you not feel like you're stupid for disagreeing, then he'll try to show you his side. And you're so much more willing, to indulge in it.
And so I think the way you just put it was that, you think it's important for Americans to have politicians on and to sort of have them, or you want to meet them
For
where
us
they
too,
are.
I want to.
But let's take the example of your interview with Donald Trump. I know that you're not a journalist.
Correct. But am I not? I might be the foremost political journalist.
It's it's possible. It's possible.
Like, what makes somebody that? It's such a.
So I don't know that it's your job in the way that it would be a journalist's job to ask particular questions of political figures.
Mm-hmm.
But in your interview with Donald Trump, do you feel like you did sort of the necessary work of asking him difficult questions?
Do you think that's necessary?
Yes.
I will answer in a second, but like, why is it? Oh, well, that's assuming that I didn't ask the difficult questions. So again, I don't know like what you think the goal of journalism is specifically. Is it to ask the things you're curious about? Do you have a responsibility for your audience within the New York Times? Do you have a responsibility for the New York Times audience? Do you have a responsibility for casual people that sometimes, like, how many people are you responsible for? Are you responsible for people in Dubai, China, Japan? They might have certain curiosities that you didn't address. Like, at one point, you're going to let somebody down. What I'd like to see more is people asking the questions that they are curious about themselves instead of trying to pander to what their audience is curious about. And for me, with the Trump interview, I had 3 things I wanted to ask him about. And I asked him those things. And that's what I felt was responsible.
And for people who didn't see it, what were those 3 things?
Protecting IVF. My wife and I had a baby through IVF. And it was really important to me that he would, do something to make sure that was protected, especially with the abortion bans. And he specifically said that he would, and the federal government would make sure that it was protected. Let's see if that actually happens. If there's federal, support for people that are going through it, like that was crucial for me. For me, it was, empathy for illegals that are here, that are not breaking the law, that have been working here in a pathway to citizenship, which it doesn't look like has been happening. This is very disheartening for me. And then end to the foreign wars, I think it's really hard for Americans specifically to be struggling so much. And then the perception of all this money leaving the country to go fight these wars in places that we'll never go visit. I think that's hard for Americans, like really difficult. And you start to feel like you're left out. So yeah, those are the 3 things that I really want to talk to him about. And I did. But what's interesting about that interview is that the second it came out, the Kamala campaign and the Trump campaign were posting the same clips of the interview.
Yeah.
It was lauded by both parties. It was really interesting. I was, and it's really just exposes that life's a Rorschach test.
So, you had these 3 things you wanted to ask Donald Trump. And, so that also means, you didn't ask about, you didn't really ask that much about economic policy, right? Which for a Bernie supporter, I thought that's weird that, it's I think you told Bernie it broke your heart when Bernie endorsed Hillary Clinton in 2016. I thought, it's strange that he's not asking Donald Trump about more pointed questions about economics.
What did I ask Bernie about economics?
Well, you guys talked a lot about economic inequality.
But what about policy?
It's an issue that matters to you.
What
Andrew,
would you like me to ask?
I don't know the specific question. The question is about
Specifics are important.
The question is about the.
You're making an accusation that I didn't ask something, but you don't have the thing that you would have liked me to ask. Here's a good moment for accountability. Do you think it was fair to present that economic policy question to me about Trump, not really knowing what you're talking about?
Yes. I asked you a question.
Okay. That's where it feels gotcha to me.
It doesn't feel gotcha.
Well,
I'm sorry. I can't tell you how you feel.
No, this is good. We're both. This is good. Therapy's good. This is good. Okay. This is. I love that. That was awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's where I felt like it was gotcha. I don't know if that's your intent right there at all. I can't put anything on intent. Yeah. But I felt gotcha because I asked you like, what would you have liked me? And you didn't have an example. And then you brought up the Bernie as a thing to, I thought, add more weight to your thing. Yeah. And then there wasn't any convo about that. Yeah. And it just felt like, in that moment, what I felt like is, he's trying to point me out as doing something inadequate in this interview. But the only goal of his question was to expose inadequacy, not to actually learn something.
Right.
So to me, that felt like gotcha. Actually, gotcha is not a feeling.
Gotcha's not a feeling.
It puts the blame on you. So that's what I was talking about. Feelings. I got to get better at. I felt. I don't know. I'll figure it out. I'll talk to my therapist about it. I'm working on it, David.
Wait, let me try and come up with a different one. So you and your wife went through the IVF process to have your child, and that's why IVF was an important subject for you to bring up with Donald Trump. And then when you're having that conversation with him, you say at the end, you said, I think it's. I'm paraphrasing. I'm not going to get exactly right, but something like, I think it's important for women moderates to hear that.
I don't recall saying that. You might be right. I just don't recall. Oh, was I saying like women who might be on the fence about who you are as like a person and like how much you care about their bodies and their ability to make choices with their bodies?
Right. But then, and this is not.
How did it make you feel? Do you think it was like trying to like promote him or something like that to them?
It made me feel confused. Because there was then also no mention or suggestion of the fact that Donald Trump was like credibly accused of groping a bunch of women, or that he was found liable in a civil suit for sexual abuse. And so, like, why was like one thing important to hear and not another? That's an example where I thought, like, this something about the balance or frame here feels strange to me.
Well, I think it's a fair question. The reaction I would have is like, what is less known? I don't think that there's a person on the planet that doesn't know that Donald Trump was like, you could grab him by the pussy. I don't think there's a person on the planet that doesn't know about the civil suit. People have done a pretty good job of getting that information out there. What there might not be is, what people might not know is that he really wants to fight to protect IVF. And that might be really important for a woman who goes, yeah, I know all this horrible stuff that this guy has been accused of or convicted of doing, but the most important decision for me right now is I want to have a family, and I want assistance in that, and I want support in that. And unfortunately, in elections, we look past certain like transgressions because there are certain things that are more important to us. So if you're a trans person, I totally understand if you're like, I can't vote for that guy. It doesn't look like he's going to allow me to live the life that I want to live and live that life freely. She or he has to go through to the other option because that's the one thing that's most important to their life. So I think by your standard, you wish that I brought up the things that he had done in referencing that.
To make the conversation feel more balanced, yeah.
To make it feel more balanced. Okay. I don't think that that's unfair. I guess what I would say is that, like, as an interviewer, I would be like, am I bringing that up for the person that hates Trump so that they're disarmed? And then am I doing this interview for the audience, not for what I authentically want to ask him? Like, there's even a part of me that wonders as you ask me these questions, like, do you feel like you have to put some pressure on me with the Trump thing because your audience might be like, why didn't you ask him about having Trump on? Or do you genuinely want to do it?
I think in this instance, it's both.
And that's an honest, fair question. And like, I go through that too, where I'm like, what do I really want to know? What do I really want to ask this person? And what do I feel like I should, or else I'll be criticized for not, like, when I had Bernie on, like, should I have asked him about taking the private jets? Should I have asked him about having 3 houses? Like, I saw all that, right? And I'm not equating this to like Donald Trump being like convicted of things, but still, like, I could have brought those things up and appeased certain people that are definitely in my audience. But the cost of that is, am I doing it just to appease them, one? And does it make him clam up and then not open up about these other things that I really want to know? Right. So do I lose my authenticity to things that I'm really curious about and building that rapport so we can have this honest, open conversation to appease what somebody who already fucking hates Bernie and what he stands for? And that's the thing that, like, you just got to decide as an interviewer.
When you're thinking about what is or isn't authentic for you, do you find that you have moments during interviews or when you're on other people's podcasts where you're like consciously in the moment choosing to say or not say something based on
That's a great question.
Whether it would be authentic for you to say?
I need to think on it. I don't think I'm going, is this authentic? I think I'm going, is this not? Because my knee-jerk feeling about the world, I'll just say, I can kind of like, I have opinions about whatever. You ask me and I can give it to you. But if I chew on it a little bit, I might actually disagree with that knee-jerk thing that I felt, But I think what I've noticed through stand-up, and I've even noticed through podcasting, is that, like, if you say the thing that you're feeling in the moment, or if you ask the question you're curious about, it always goes well. It might be the most absurd thing. If somebody's missing an arm in the front row, and you're just like, where to go? Like, everybody else that's seeing it is also thinking that same thing, and there's this beautiful catharsis.
Yeah.
And that's, I guess, what I mean about authenticity. It doesn't mean it's right. My authentic feeling isn't necessarily like the right thing in a moment, but it is true. And I can live with criticism for the thing that I believe in and the thing that I feel like is true to me. Being criticized for the thing that is fraudulent to you is like a double whammy. It's the worst. You were fake and you were rejected.
Yeah.
Reject me for who I am, that's fine.
Here's something I am, this falls under the category of things I am legitimately curious about.
Sure.
So in your...
The other stuff, no curiosity.
So in your stand-up and, on the podcast or appearances on other podcasts, there are some, you'd call them slurs that you use.
Sure.
And I'm thinking of one in particular, starts with R, commonly used to describe intellectually disabled people.
Yeah.
And then, so you use that, you use, I think in the first minute of Infamous, you use a derogatory term for Mexicans.
Which one? Oh, yeah. But to the Mexican.
Right. Yeah. But
they're in on it.
There are other ones you use, and the thing that, but then there are other.
It's in a compliment. I think it's important to like contextually.
Oh yes, I'd also like to say the thing that is I think it's important to note with your stuff is that it does never feel mean spirited. But then there are other derogatory terms that you don't go near.
Like which?
Like, I've never heard you use a derogatory word for a Jewish person. Or
really? I blame Jews for homosexuality in the latest special.
Yeah, but that's
no, homophobia.
But you don't use the derogatory word.
Which one are you talking about? The K one?
K1, yeah, that would be the one.
Yeah,
that would be the one. But how do you decide?
It's not really part of my.
But how do you decide which ones feel okay and which ones don't?
We'll call them like the small hats. Yeah.
But where's
the line?
Where are your lines for language?
The N word I don't do.
Yeah.
Yeah, the K word I don't really do.
But why certain ones and why not other ones?
Oh, that's a good question.
If we accept they're all derogatory,
I don't accept that.
Oh.
I think in reality people are trying to protect they're trying to protect people.
Yeah.
And the protection of people, I think, is like a beautiful, benevolent thing. And I think it's a great thing to endeavor to do. But sometimes it goes to the point where we're making words harmful that aren't harmful. Okay, so for example, like Latinx, which I'm sure you've heard of this term, Latinx. Are you familiar with it?
Yeah.
Okay, what do you think of that term?
What do I think of it?
Yeah.
That's a hard question. What do I think of the term? To me, it feels like.
Have you heard of a fire retardant?
Yeah.
How do you feel about that word?
The fire retardant. Retardant in that context means to slow something down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And should we make a different word for that?
But
at
it's
a certain
not.
point,
But a fire retardant is not a human being.
Well, no, but the root word has a scientific definition,
right?
That we have then labeled an emotional, painful, pejorative.
Yeah.
That we could also remove that label, and I think that it's mainly labeled by people who are not dealing with mental illness. I think it's people who want to, often like parents, who want to protect people who have these mental disabilities. So we're doing this thing, which is beautiful at its core, which is to protect the people who may not be able to protect themselves, but we don't truly know if they are hurt by that. Now, if a parent ever said, hey, that word hurts me and I want you to say it, I'm never going to say it in front of them. I don't want to hurt you. That's not my goal.
Yeah.
But if they're like, and I don't want you to ever say it again in your life, then I'm like, that's not going to happen. I'll never say it around you because I just don't want to hurt you. I want to have fun. I want you to enjoy. But you can't dictate what I do or don't say. Yeah. But the reality is, like, there's always going to be somebody offended by a word or opinion or whatever you say. So at a certain point in time, like, what do? You just curtail how you speak completely so that you don't offend people, or do you just have your constitution and understand who you are as a person and you go on living life and accept the blowback that comes with that?
You know what's just straight about that word in particular, where I saw there was Joe Rogan said something like, the ability to use that word, or like the lack of inhibition about using that word is somehow a cultural victory.
I need to know the context of that conversation. I think that what I would presume, it's this idea that we're no longer going to be policing language as strictly as we had maybe in like the last 5 or 6 years. Yeah. And that we're going to understand intention a little bit more, and we're not going to, I think there are people that like have great intentions and they're really trying to protect communities. And I think there are people that also have like bad intentions and they're just trying to bludgeon people with criticism. And it's a power move. And I've like seen it happen. Like, this person said this on a podcast. We are going to email every one of their sponsors and ask those sponsors to drop them. Now, that's interesting. That seems like that person is trying to exert an immense amount of power from a position that maybe they don't normally have that in their life. And I think that's a little bit gross. Thinking
about Joe Rogan is now making me think of, this idea of there's like a manosphere podcast world that appeals to sort of young men in particular. And it has a lot to do with, ideas of masculinity. And even though none of these shows, I don't think, and when I say these shows, I'm thinking of like Flagrant or Theo Von or Joe Rogan's show, where these shows are certainly not seen as progressive. Why do you think that there is some idea of masculinity that progressives or the left has not been able to talk to?
Why do you think?
Andrew, it's very hard for me to come up with answers to questions like that, because
it's a tough question. I think you have a thoughtful answer.
I think there are less complicated ideas of masculinity that are often sort of put forward on those kinds of shows that are sort of more approachable and maybe more familiar to a lot of men. And so it's just like an easier thing to latch onto. They're like, oh yeah, I like saying off-color shit with my buddies, or like I I'm interested in.
Do you like saying off-color shit with your buddies?
Yeah.
You do. It was fun.
Yeah.
And it doesn't define you as a person.
No.
And you feel comfortable saying it with your buddies because they know who you are.
But I got away from my question. Why do you think the left has had a hard time?
I don't think it's
reaching.
That's
okay.
all I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think it's the nature of media a little bit. You know, when Joe is bringing somebody on, he's only bringing them on to ask him things that he's curious about.
Yeah.
He's not going, I have to ask him these questions to make sure the interview is balanced so that my audience doesn't think that I was doing a puff piece, whatever. So what I think is people prefer in general more genuine conversations, which is more curiosity-based conversations, instead of, I already know how I feel about you, and I'm going to prove to my audience that I'm right the way I feel about you. And I think what happens to that is, yeah, your audience that agrees with you will like it, but you can't bring everybody in. And so I think this is one part of it. I also think that the ability to kind of like speak freely, how you said before, what was it, when you're with your friends, you just kind of busting balls, whatever the term is, which we all do.
Yeah.
And saying maybe some of those no words that we don't say here and we, say we shouldn't say, but once we're with our friends, all of a sudden they're fine to say. So once you see those conversations on a podcast that way more similarly reflect your life, they're not trying to push a specific agenda. Now that you could make the argument that agendas are being pushed, by the way. So I would even like caveat that thing. But yeah, to me, it's not surprising. And it happens on girl podcasts. They go fucking crazy, these girl podcasts as well. So it's not just, manosphere. There is immense curiosity in like authentic, genuine things. The New York Times is never going to do a get ready with me video. Right?
I'm sure someone in this building has put thought into
pitched it, but you guys are probably like, that's beneath us. We don't get ready.
I don't know.
It's like, well, you better fucking get ready. Because these girls are doing it on TikTok and they're getting millions of people to watch. So I think there's just been a shift towards more relatability. And I think that guys are definitely feeling more relatability on the guy pods.
Yeah.
And then I think the girls are feeling more relatability on the girl pods. So to me, it's just, and corporate media needs to, and I feel like it's already happening, like this conversation is like a version of that, where it's like they just need to make the adjustment to the new marketplace. And before, when it's, the Times is competing with who else, CBS or the Post or these types of things, like you're all competing within the same rules. And then podcasts came in and threw out the rules.
Yeah.
Say whatever curse words you want, whatever no words you want, like actually talk like you're with your friends.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that sounds way better.
It's actually interesting to hear you put it like that, where we're all working under the same rules, because it actually, for me, makes a conversation like this more difficult because they're like our rules and expectations that.
Yeah. What are some? I'd love to know. Like, what do you feel?
Well, there's
encumbered
the most obvious one would be like language rules.
Sure.
Certain words you can't say, or there's even just sort of like an implicit style of conversation that I feel like I'm supposed to have that is actually like inhibiting a little bit in a conversation with you. And I'm feeling that in this conversation because it's there's ways to talk with you that I think are actually, they're just made more difficult because it's like, I know there's sort of a little voice on my shoulder.
Yeah.
But
first of all, this is another example of one of the
don't
things
say it again. Don't say it again.
Do you not like compliments?
And it just
it's
feels
uncomfortable
like,
for you.
I don't like it.
Why?
I don't like,
You're so in touch with your feelings. I'm like so envious. It's, I think, a unique thing that like it makes me want to listen to your content more. It's like you're reacting in real time to. You hate compliments. What is that about?
But the thing I wanted to say was, it's interesting this idea of sort of like a shift rightward for conservative young men, and somehow like the manosphere is driving that. Because
I wouldn't agree shift rightward. What I would say that this is a lot more of and you asked specifically why maybe men are kind of drawn in this direction.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, like all of us, I don't know about Theo, but like Joe's Democrat his whole life, my Democrat my whole life, like registered Democrat.
So you voted for Trump,
I
right?
voted for Trump, yeah. But I, to be honest, my vote was more like I voted against a Democratic institution that I did feel like was like stripping the the democratic process from its constituents.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't like the way things were going. I thought people were hurting. They didn't like the way things were going. And Kamala was literally just going, yeah, we're going to keep doing that. You can't be surprised if you go, yeah, I thought Joe did a great job, and we're going to keep on doing that, if people are upset and they decide to vote in a different direction.
Yeah.
So I think that, like, the first reaction is, okay, we didn't do anything wrong. It was just podcast bros. That's what switched the election. And now I think they're starting to realize, oh, wow, maybe there's some policy things that people were unhappy with, and we have to change that. And I think, like, the most glaring example is that there were unions that did not endorse Kamala. They did not endorse the Democratic Party. And then there were some unions that endorsed Trump. If Democrats cannot win the votes of union workers, who are they for? Like, what's that? Like, to me, that says everything. You worried about podcasts. The unions are going, we're going to go with the Republican guys who are trying to break up unions.
Yeah.
I think what happened is the Democrats, I think, were, and I hate to make this so like Democrat, Republican, because it's not all Democrats, by the way. I think that there are some Democrats that are quite critical of this. You see, obviously, Bernie, you see AOC, but I think what happens is the Democrats are like tied to the same, corporations that are funding Republicans. And they can't actually push back against those corporations because they get so much funding from them. And in order to really make it a class war, which you should, because that's honestly the thing that's going to resonate with the most people, they can't do it because they're in the pockets of, pharmaceutical companies, they're in the pockets of the medical industrial complex, just like Republicans are as well. So what they have to do is they made it an identity politics issue. And I think that was unrelatable, probably, and made people sway. And I would say that is part of it. And I would say the other part is, and I think that it's important to say this for progressives in general, it is a harder job to be a progressive publicly than it is to be a conservative. Progressives are trying to push progress forward. How can we get more equity, more equality for our marginalized people? It is much harder to just fuck around with your boy on a podcast and say whatever words as we normally would when part of your identity and your agenda is to seemingly push these things forward because it can be immediately used against you. Whereas a conservative can say whatever they want, as long as they're not talking about the gun lobby or, Christians. They can kind of say whatever. And then because they're not exactly trying to push everything, it's not their identity to put, if anything, it's make America great again. It's like, let's roll it back a little bit. So I think it is a harder thing for Dems to do. And I think that's why they avoided the podcast.
You're talking so intelligently about sort of the Democratic challenge right now, but I was watching your appearance on the Trigonometry podcast, and you know the quote I'm going to bring up, right?
This is so disingenuous, but go on. This is so like
you'll tell me why it's disingenuous, but for people who
so it's like this is the exact example of the Rorschach test. But go on.
Yeah,
it's like
where you're talking about politics, and you were talking about how you were Democrat, and they sort of lost you.
No, I'll give it to you if you want.
Yeah, do it. Yeah.
Okay, so the conversation, the context of the conversation was about like, did people change or have parties changed?
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure. And then I'm like, well, parties have changed their priorities. And then people haven't really changed theirs, just parties have shifted in certain directions. So when I was younger, Democrats were cool as hell. Bill Clinton is playing the sax on Arsenio. He's smoking weed. You're like, oh, these guys are cool. Like, they embraced homosexuality. I grew up in New York City. Like, I understand, like, the importance of the gay community and, like, making this an awesome place. Like, they embrace what I thought were minorities. I'm like, yo, this is awesome. And the perspective when you're just a kid, you're not out there. You're like, oh, yeah, Republicans are just, like, some Southern racists. That's kind of what you thought. And then Republicans at the time were like, don't say bad words. Hip-hop is bad. Rock and roll music is dangerous. They're like finger wagging, right? They're telling you what to do. And they're the ones that are like kind of inhibiting free speech. And Democrats were, perception-wise, pushing it forward and protecting the free speech. And then I just create this juxtaposition. I go, now Trump's got 3 baby mamas and And I go, and the Democrats are saying what words we can't say. You can't say, retard, or you can't say this. Like, you're policing speech, and the Republicans are like, yo, say whatever you want. You got to do it. And I'm like, wow, look at this shift in terms of the parties. Did the people move at all, or have the parties moved?
Yeah.
And I go, and I say this thing. I'm being purposely reductive because I'm a comedian talking to comedians. And I'm like, yeah, so I'm going to vote the guy who gets 3 baby moms. So I'm voting for the guy who's getting more pussy or something like that.
Yeah.
I get how anybody who saw it out of the context of the conversation was like, this guy is an idiot. Yeah. Like, you voted for somebody because they get laid. But at the same time, it's like, do you really think that was, like, at a certain point in time, can we afford even like a modicum of intelligence to the person saying something? Like, do you think that's the point I was actually trying to demonstrate? That all Democrats need to do is get laid, and then, yeah, we'll vote for them. Ridiculous.
Yeah.
So,
but the point was a point was that if Democrats exhibited a certain more comfort with like a kind of libertinism, then that would be part of. Well,
I think
appealing
that is
to someone.
I think it's a good extrapolation for it. But the point was actually that the people haven't shifted. We have these conversations all the time, like you were saying earlier, like white males went to the right. And it's like, I think a better way to look at it is, have parties shifted? Like, we have no problem saying that Trump completely changed the Republican Party. Like, it looks nothing like the party of 10 years ago.
Right.
Like, he completely transformed it. You could make the argument that like Bernie is transforming the Democratic Party. So we know that parties change. And I think people kind of stay in their areas and parties shift, and sometimes they can shift and grab more people. So that was the conversation I was trying to say. It's not people running away. It's parties running away. But who gets laid more, bro? It's just so, like, I saw it starting to go viral. I'm like, do I have to fucking address it? Like,
yeah.
Oh God. It was like every pundit did something about it. Like, just, but whatever. No, I'm responsible. I shouldn't have said it like that. Yeah. I should have found a way to make the point that wasn't so easily refutable. So that's on me.
When you said a second ago, you're a comedian, you're on a podcast with other comedians.
Yeah.
Do you think there's, something just like slightly disingenuous about that? Because it's like in the same...
I know the argument you're going to make.
Yeah.
Where it's just like, we're using it as like a get out of jail free card.
Or it's like, really, when is somebody supposed to, who's watching it or listening, they're supposed to minute to minute the conversation be like, oh, now he's in comedian mode. No, never. Now he's in public commentator mode. Like, how?
Always treat me as a comedian.
Always treat you as a comedian.
Yeah, don't, because I've never asked you to treat me any other way.
Yeah, but you're talking seriously now.
You are making me serious. But I'm a comedian. To me, I'm always a comedian. You guys are deciding that I'm not. But do I have to be funny every second to be a comedian? When you're funny, do you stop being a journalist?
No.
So then why is it when I'm asking a serious question, I stop being a comedian?
Right. So, but when you say the serious thing.
Yeah, go.
When you say the serious thing, does that then mean the reaction to the serious thing can always be sort of defended just by saying, no, I was a comedian?
When have I done that? I've heard this criticism about podcasters, but when have I gotten upset at the reaction of like?
No, but when you're saying that, I'm not saying I'm a political pundit. I'm just a comedian. That is your version of saying, it's not up to me to answer these questions about things I've said.
That's not true. What question have I avoided?
I think you understand the point I'm trying to make, and my semantics are not working.
You have an opinion about me, and you're not willing to wiggle away from it, but you don't realize that I'm agreeing with you.
Yeah.
So what I just did before, when you brought up the baby mamas and vote for Democrats thing, is the last thing I said was, I have to be better at what I communicate.
Yeah.
Because I ultimately bear the consequences of that communication, whether I'm joking or not. I would love if I was afforded like a modicum of intelligence in the way that people interpret it, but that might not be happening, right? Yeah. I would love it. Like, I'm saying, I'm a comedian, I'm busting balls with my friends, but I take on the responsibility of the reaction to that if these people don't want to see me as a comedian. But what I would love is what you have, which is you get to be a journalist, but then when you make a joke, we don't go, you were pretending to be a comedian there, and that joke that you did wasn't funny enough, so right now you never get to make jokes again, because that joke you tried to make was not funny. What I'm saying is that there is not an exact even exchange in the mirror between us, but I will take it on.
Yeah.
If I say something out loud, I bear the responsibility of it.
Yeah.
That's the cost of this business. We get to talk shit for a living with our friends and interview fucking, presidents and like thoughtful like historians and just somebody who thinks the pyramids were built by aliens. Like, this is awesome.
The experience you just had of trying to explain something to me and needing to do it like 5 times before I got it. Now you know what it's like to be my wife. So how do you not understand what I'm saying?
Listen, man, I've been there, bro.
See, I just did a joke. I did a joke.
See? And if it wasn't funny enough, I want you to let him know, okay? He's a journalist. Shouldn't be doing this comedy stuff. Yeah.
This is maybe the last question for now, because we're talking again next week. But you mentioned just in passing that being in therapy.
Yeah.
What are you working on now?
Just having like just relationship, like having a kid is just throws everything for such a loop, and you just got to stay on it. So any way I can like improve in certain ways, and
so what are things that you need to improve on?
Like not saying what the person is doing, but like saying what I'm feeling in a moment. Like not trying to like win the interaction, but just like understanding how something affected me. And also, this is a good one too, like just staying, like being calm doesn't mean that you can't prick somebody else. Like just being calm and reactive to something doesn't mean that can also not be like frustrating to the person you're talking to, but you think you have maybe some like high ground in the argument just simply because you're like calm.
I'm not mad.
I'm not
mad.
Yeah, I'm not mad. And you seem really frustrated, so I must be the reasonable one here. That's not necessarily the case. So like, so just like learning about that kind of stuff. And I wish I could do therapy every day. I'll be honest. I think it's like just understanding like why I react to certain things. Why is justice important to me?
Yeah.
Why am I sensitive? Why do I care what people think? Why do I not care sometimes what people think? Like,
when are the times that you care what people think?
Like, so for example, that bummed me out when people like took what I said at face value. It was fair. With the trigonometry.
Yeah.
Like, it's totally fair. I said it. You're allowed to react to it however you want. You're entitled to your reaction. But like that bummed me out a little bit. I was like, man, it's like so easy to discredit me as just some like dumb bro if you just look at that. So that bummed me out. But then you just you keep on trucking, man.
After the break, I talk to Andrew again, and he tells me what he's been thinking about from our first conversation. Andrew, thank you for taking the time to talk with me again.
Of course.
So, I was thinking a lot about a lot of things from the conversation so far.
Yeah.
But the first thing is, you described yourself as a sensitive person who also cares about what people think about you. And like part of your job involves poking at sensitivities, which means that some people are going to think negative things about you. And I thought, that's like an interesting psychological juxtaposition. So how might your own sort of insecurities play into the work that you do?
I would say like the most specific or like nuanced version of what we were talking about in the earlier part of the pod. I'm specifically sensitive about people believing I am somebody that I don't believe I am.
Right. So it's almost like if you feel like you're being criticized for what feel like the right reasons or fair reasons, then you're able to deal with it.
Yeah, you had a good question during the pod that I was like, I thought about like all week. Well, you had several good questions, but like you're like, you don't say the N word or the K word, but you'll say other words. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I don't think that that's true. Like, I didn't know what to think of it in the moment. And then you were even brought up like the R word, like how I feel comfortable saying that one. And I really thought about it. And like, and this is me like trying to like retrofit my knee-jerk feelings on it. Does that make sense? Like,
yep.
And I think that like a slur, what makes a slur bad is like it's a descriptor plus organized violence and perceived organized violence. And I think that like as humans, if we feel like there was organized violence along with a descriptor, we're like, ooh, that's bad. And if we don't remember or can't or aren't taught, or it's like too far in the past, that organized violence, we start to feel like it's not as heavy. And I think like that's why our reaction to it is different. I think it's why our reaction is different, when it comes to maybe Latino slurs or when it comes to even Asian slurs. It's like, where's the organized violence?
It's very hard to talk in absolutes about these kinds of things because when I heard you just give that definition, my mind immediately thought, well, I don't know if it's organized violence, but like, there definitely was a spike in violence against, Asian Americans post-pandemic. And like, does that count as organized violence? And then does that have some bearing on using slurs for Asian Americans? I feel like we could get stuck like litigating word by word, and it's just, I don't want to do that.
I agree with you. I think we're beyond like the word police. Like, I think if we get caught in, like, you don't want to be word police, David. I think that's like maybe 5-10 years ago. I think we've moved on beyond word police.
I appreciate that you brought up that you had been doing some reflecting on parts of the conversation that we've had up till now. And I'm also, I was wondering if you think there are ways in which your own sensitivities or maybe even insecurities might have shown up in our conversation.
Sure. To say no would be ridiculous. I think that like the world is constantly rebounding off of your insecurities or sensitivities, and at least me. And like, I'm just trying to manage like what those reactions are. And sometimes I feel confident in those reactions. And sometimes I reflect and I go, oh, wow, maybe that was, but I mean, I feel like you know the answer to that question. Do you think you were insecure at all in our conversation? If I go, no, I'm a psychopath. So yeah, of course. Yeah. I'm a fucking regular human being, David.
Yeah. One thing that you said that stuck out for me that, perhaps relates is you said you can feel a need to win the interaction. And I wondered, and this is
I said that was the thing that I am working on.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was wondering if, and also, Andrew, I want to be clear right now. In no question I ask, am I trying to trap you into anything? It's all coming from a place of curiosity and trying to understand. Does that make sense?
I think it makes sense. I don't know if I believe that you believe it.
I do.
But I think it makes sense. I think you would like to believe that of yourself.
Yes.
But I do think that you have like a line of thinking that you're getting towards and you're using questioning to get me to that. And so I'm hesitant to simply just accept every single thing as a yes or no.
Yeah.
Because that might be another rung of the ladder to get to this point where I might have to go, hold on, there's more nuance to what I just said.
Yeah. And I did wonder if the way you so often like turned the question I was asking you back around on me, like, was that sort of a way of trying to like wrong foot me or like undercut the question or invalidate the questions? Which I think
How so?
There were times where I would ask you a question and you'd say, well, what do you think about that? And I didn't have answers or I didn't have good answers, but I thought it was interesting in retrospect because it's like my ability to express an opinion or give an answer to the question I'm asking, especially questions that have some political content. It's like kind of supposed to be somewhat irrelevant, like, and I'm sure I'm guilty of hypocrisy in this sometimes, or I don't always ride the line as cleanly as I could. But like, it's the thing that I think I'm trying to do is like giving people a chance to hear from subjects without my own political or ideological opinions filtering in. And that's kind of a big difference between like what my job is and what your job is. And I think because of that difference, like the question flipping, it was something I really struggled with.
Why do you think you struggle with it?
I just thought I'd two things. One, and you're just you're flipping it again. But
I'm just a curious guy.
yeah, with the content that does have like, sort of a political edge to it, like I'm really not supposed to betray my own thinking and feeling.
Well, who's supposed to, according to whom? Like,
Well, there is an idea of news journalism as sort of impartial and objective. I'm not supposed to be putting my thumb on the scale. You know what I mean?
well, maybe I was asking you to reflect on it because I thought you might be putting your thumb on the scale.
Yeah.
And by reflecting on it and you sharing your opinion, it could inform the people listening why you're asking me such specific questions.
Yeah.
And that way, the listener goes, oh, I see why this line of questioning is happening, because he has this perspective about this situation and he's trying to get to this outcome. Me, for example, I just have a rule. I'm not going to ask anybody a question that I haven't thought of myself. Like, I find that, not to be insulting to you, but like, if I haven't taken the time to like reflect on my thoughts on a question, like I wouldn't even feel comfortable asking somebody like on camera recorded how they feel about it. If you're asking me a question about what I've done in a situation or why I did something in a situation and you haven't reflected on what you would have done in that situation, what are you really seeking in my answer? Like, what I did in the situation.
Yeah. I think the
So,
thing I'm seeking is like sort of the thinking underneath it. What is the opinion of you that you seem to think I hold, or like I'm pushing you towards or trying to frame you in a particular way?
I don't know. That's why I ask.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much like you feel like you want to get across. I'm not sure how much you feel like a responsibility to your audience to ask certain questions. Like I don't, like, sometimes there's moments where I'm like, oh, David really wants to know about this. And sometimes there's moments where I'm like, I think David feels like if he doesn't ask this, that he'll be criticized. Like, I'm trying to gauge like what, you really want.
After our first conversation, when we were down in the lobby and you were leaving, we sort of continued the conversation.
Yeah.
And
we don't stop talking, David.
What?
I said, we don't stop talking.
Maybe we should, but
Go.
But we were sort of talking about the idea that there has been sort of a growing sort of distrust or dissatisfaction with legacy media. In response to that, I think a lot of listeners have turned to podcasts and other voices that they see as more authentic or uncompromised, voices like yourself or Joe Rogan.
That they shouldn't.
Yeah. So my question about that is like, if you have a kind of authority, whether you ask for it or not, or whether you think it's correct or not, like what are the possible ripple effects of that authority? And also then what responsibility might come with it?
Yeah. I think a bunch of things happen at the same time, right? I think that the internet decentralized information. And I think with the internet, and you saw this even in like early small little versions where like conspiracy stuff started to pop out, right? Like conspiracy stuff is very exciting because it's like, it makes dumb people feel smart, right? It's just like, oh, I know something nobody else knows. I'm smart now, right? And the truth of the matter is the truth is boring. Whenever we get to like the actual truth of it, almost always it is boring. Okay. But when the information is decentralized and then we're just podcasters talking shit with our friends, and I know that seems like a convenient excuse, but you have to understand, like in its inception, that's what it was. And this thing gets so fucking popular. And I think that there's a couple issues, right? I think it's like media, for example, maybe traditional media has like echoed certain sentiments that weren't exactly truthful. Maybe they're not blatant lies, but there might be like certain things that they, let's say, push that we all kind of accepted and then have like recently become outed, if you will, right? So now all of a sudden there's like this little, this like undercurrent of like, oh, I guess we can't trust those institutions. Now the reality is like, you guys could get like 90% right. When you get one thing wrong, it's like, they're a propaganda tool, It's like you could do almost perfect reporting, but if you get one thing wrong, we can write the entire thing off, right? So I think one, also people were like moving away from like was it print media a lot of times, and I think that there's multiple reasons for that. One, like I can listen to a podcast while I do my job. I can't read the Times while I'm driving to work. I can listen to a podcast, and then we build up like probably like a parasocial relationship with these people where you like really get connected to their lives. And I think what happened is more people started listening to us, and this is obviously spearheaded by the GOAT, Joe Rogan, and then more people started listening to podcasting in general.
Mhm.
And because more people are listening, popular figures are now going on these platforms to have conversations, like presidents and other figures. And now all of a sudden, like everybody's consuming their information about these very serious things on these platforms that were not designed to do this in the first place. And then when we go, hey, we're just asking questions and making fun of our friends, there is a very reasonable criticism, which is, yes, that's what you started out as, but now that everybody is watching you, do you now have a new responsibility?
Yeah, and what's the answer to that?
First of all, I just want to say, I think that that's fair. I don't think that we have to like take a specific journalistic approach, meaning like I don't think we have to kind of remove our own desires and the questions that we want to ask. But just for me personally, I think it's important to like reflect multiple viewpoints on the pod. And we desperately tried to do that in the last election. The Democrats that we asked were not willing to come on. Now they are starting to come on. And I think it makes for like much better podcasting. Also, like the numbers when they come on are incredible. Clearly, there's like a real thirst from our audience about that, but also the world over. Like, and to me, what that indicates about our audience is it's not this extreme one direction. Like we are interested in all these different things. So now that we have access to these people, I think it makes for like a really fruitful conversation. And then we would hope that people have the agency to make their own ideas.
And the amount of political influence podcasters have had or have is highly debatable. But there is, of course, the old idea that politics is downstream of culture. So
absolutely.
So if we take that as true, what influence might popular podcasters be having on politicians and political discourse?
I think that's a great point. I think that you're 100% right about politics being downstream from culture. What I would also say is that I think podcasts are downstream from culture too.
Oh,
I don't think
explain that. Yeah.
I think podcasts are before politicians, but I think culture starts, then podcasts is like something over here, and then politicians.
Yeah.
And I think that the ones that offer societal utility in that moment tend to be the most prolific in that moment. Same thing with comedians. Like comedians are downstream from culture. And, if you're a comedian and you got a lot of like women are annoying jokes, if we're going through, the rise and fourth wave feminism and you have all these slogans like the future is female and all men are suck or something like that, that comedian is going to probably do really well during that time period because there's a societal utility.
And, sort of on the idea that like the culture was sort of hungry for comedians and podcasters who kind of were doing what you were doing. Do you have any hunches about like sort of what the audience needs are that like are currently not being served, and like sort of what a new wave of voices might step in to offer?
I think you'll see a lot of voices on the left that are like really disciplined, great arguments, like well thought out, like brilliant left-wing pundits will rise during this time right now. Because you always want something to like offset the balance of power. And the right's in charge, you want great arguments from the left. I'm not talking about like the septum piercing, like, like purple fucking hair, like not those great arguments. I'm talking about like disciplined, laser focus, research, understand legislation. I think they'll be quite prominent.
Yeah. What about in comedy?
I think people tend during a Trump administration to get a little exhausted. And I think now that you can kind of say in comedy, there's like different cycles, right? So it's like when things are super censored, you have I think maybe the more prolific comedians start to sprout out from that, where the George Carlins, the Richard Pryors, the Chris Rocks, right? They come from these times of like censoriousness, right? So it's like you can't say these words, and they're going to use humor to kind of say these things and to have these ideas. And then the pendulum swings to kind of where we are right now, where you can say anything. Nobody's really upset with anything anymore. And during this time, comedy tends to get quite absurdist. So when there's nothing to push back on, you just float. And this is where like the Zach Galifianakises tend to thrive. The Stephen Wrights tend to thrive. There's nothing to push back against, so they're almost pushing back against reality itself. So I would think like people in that realm, but that's just my personal take on kind of like what happens in comedy. And eventually we'll get more censored, and then you'll have the voices that push back against that, and the cycle repeats forever.
You mentioned Trump, so I want to ask. You said you voted for him basically as a sort of protest vote against the Democrats. But how do you think of the job President Trump's been doing so far?
I think that that's unfair for me to say. I don't think it was simply protest. I think the reason why I entertained the Republican Party for the first time in my life was because the Democrats, I didn't like what was happening, and they had said very clearly that was just going to continue. In terms of IVF, I think that like he's taken action in protecting it and potentially like in increasing people's ability to access it. Who knows if that legislation will actually like get put through, but that would be awesome. And in terms of immigration, like I want more. Like if you broke the law, if you broke the law, you fucked up. You're already here illegally, so you already broke the law, and you're breaking the law, you got to go. If you've been working your ass off for 10 years here, you've got a family, there's got to be a system where we can just give these people a pathway to citizenship or a green card or something. There has to be a better way than simply just, hey, you go. And that's what I was pleading with him for on the pod, which is maybe pleading is a strong word, but I was asking him to show empathy for these people that he's also employed. Like I was like, listen, you've had hotels, you know these people, you know that they're going to bust their ass, they're going to work hard, and they want a better life. It's like why my mom came here. It's why your parents or maybe his great grandparents or some shit came here. So it's like I would like there to be much more empathy in that department. I don't think that that's happening.
And what would a Democrat have to do to win your vote back?
He would just have to be named Bernie Sanders, and I'll fucking vote for him in a heartbeat. No. I think what the Democrats need to do, number one, is just like allow a democratic process. The primary will tell you everything about what the party wants. It really will. It's like trust the democratic process. Just get some primaries going, and you're going to see which part of the party people support. I think that they've become quite disillusioned with like the typical institutional elites, as Bernie Sanders calls them. And I think they're probably leaning towards, maybe Bernie's, what does he call them? Like democratic socialism, faction of the party. And you could force feed people one thing that they don't want and they will reject you. And I think that's kind of what happened. Or you could embrace the changing of the party. And then if that changing the party ends up failing those people, they will eventually reject it. But a democracy allows people to make the decisions that they feel like they want, for better or for worse. We have to at least be willing to entertain for worse. How can we learn as a people if we don't entertain for worse?
Andrew, can you end with a family-friendly joke?
Yeah. A family-friendly joke. Okay, here's a joke. This is a joke that I think it was a Louis joke that then Seinfeld told the joke to Louis when they were doing this conversation. It was like four of them. Do you remember that thing they did with Ricky Gervais, Chris Rock, Louis C.K.?
There four of them were like in a room together. And
it was comedians on comedians. And so Seinfeld tells a Seinfeldian version of this Louis joke. But the joke itself is it's something like, like going on vacation with the family, like I put the kids in the car seats. I put my wife in the car seat, put the coffees in the coffee holder. I put the bags in the back. I give the snack seat to the kids. I put the last bag in the back. I close the trunk. I close my wife's door. I close the kids' door. And when I'm walking from my wife's door to my door, that's my vacation.
I know exactly the joke you're talking about. I think about this joke constantly. It's very true.
It's so good. It's so good. And it's like, at its core, you could say quite mean. Like the idea that like that's the beauty of a joke, and why how we can't like it what it does is allows us to freely access these like maybe darker thoughts and emotions that we have. It's like, he loves his family. They all love their fucking family. But in that little moment, they're like, oh, they're safe and I don't have to fucking deal with them. And we all have that feeling for a little moment. And then we come back to reality. And maybe that's what would be awesome if people get about jokes, is like these things that we're saying, it's just what we feel oftentimes in that little moment. And then we step back.
Thanks for taking all the time to talk with me, Andrew. I appreciate it.
You're great, David. I know you hate me saying that, but I love this format about coming back. I think it's so cool.
Zip it. I don't know.
Yeah. Sorry. Bye.
All right. Take it easy.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.